Is that SOS?
Is that a client?
Help, I've been here for 10 days. We're starting to sing.
See how the evening goes.
All right, Sarah, you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, good evening, counselors. Thank you so much for being here. This is your first time, some of you, seeing the little library budget. So this is the cost of keeping the building open, pretty much. So our biggest line items are payroll for full-time this year. 324, 296 is the, you all should have the most up-to-date copy. Is that what you have for payroll?
Which one?
This one here.
Portrait. Part-time, 125,054, that's for 8 part-time staff. And we currently have 6 full-time staff. We have, this year we've had 1 full-time staff member retire, but wanted to stay on as part-time, so she's with us as part-time. No one can leave the library, it turns out. And then we had a past part-time employee that wanted to come back. She had quit, and then she wanted to come back. So that's, yeah, we have 8 part-time, 6 full-time, and then we could possibly have another retirement this coming year. And when that happens, I'd like to replace her, she's at 24 hours a week, replace her with a full-time staff person. But it might not happen, and if our payroll for full-time is actually less for fiscal year 25 than it is for 24, just salary differences with the half a year addition of a 7th full-time person. Phone and internet, this year I took it up a little bit. It seems like we have an increased service charge. Power, 16,000. Our actual as of February 24th was 8,645. So that's why power is up a little bit from last year. Water's been pretty steady, 750. Printing and advertising, no change, we're still at 2,000. Office supplies I reduced just because we're not using as much paper, pencils, tape, staples. We have no plans to purchase any office furniture. That's been something that in the past couple of years we've bought a couple pieces of office furniture, little things, chairs. Postage, we also reduced postage. We no longer pay for library users out-of-state materials. So we've been considerably reducing postage each year. Travel and car expense, that is for 1 trip for 2 library staff people to use 1 car to go to the main library association conference that happens once a year. Dues and memberships, that is for our library. We are part of a couple different library associations that we pay dues for. Training, we reduced it this year. This is enough to include 1 online course for someone. Hopefully it's a course that someone can share, and then a little bit extra. We occasionally buy things. We're remaking our website right now, and we occasionally don't know what we're doing, so we have to take a course. Conferences and meetings, that is for 2 staff to attend the MLA conference. That's in May. Professional services, this went up this year. This is our service contracts for Transco, Minuteman, ST Imaging, Pine State Elevator, Eastern Fire, Thayer, all of the different contracts that we have for services. Building repair and maintenance, we held that steady this year. This is the cost of janitorial type supplies, cleaning, paper supplies, and service calls. Thayer, elevator, always the elevator, electrician, that kind of thing. Data processing, I brought that down this year. The current year we had some staff equipment that we needed to buy, new computers, but we don't see any equipment purchases happening this coming year. Property insurance, we brought that, or that's at 2,000 still. This year we were 1,738, but apparently there's a little bit of a raise happening for property. maybe you all have guidance if that needs to go higher. I haven't heard a number yet. Heat, 15,000. That's based on this year so far. We've spent 8,415. I've made everyone, what was that?
9431 as of today. For heat.
For heat, oh,
Yeah.
we got another.
Yeah.
I've made everyone wear sweaters this year, so we've,
Put the trash on that.
right? I warned everyone, there was a year, I don't remember which year it was it, there was one year that it was a lot higher, and I realized why last year, so this year we wore sweaters. Periodicals I reduced because we're part of Overdrive now, and it has access to over 5,000 magazines, so there's just more of a selection for online use. Electronic collection, I brought that down. That is only the participation fee for joining Overdrive, which is access to Libby. And then I included the same amount of capital that we've been putting in for really little things that come up during the year. I have quite a list of things that we could use for that amount of capital funds. We need new pull-down window treatments. They're all like falling off and breaking. We have bathroom updates we need to do. There's rotten trim on the Tisdale house. There's a long list. I could choose from one of them. And then just revenue. This is anticipated revenue from other towns, 38,752. Card fees, I'm estimating or anticipating about 12,000, and then miscellaneous, that's really just the cost of printing, people using printing services. And then I'm thinking that we'll have we'll be able to carry forward at least 10,000 from this year, possibly more, and might have guidance on that, if that's something we can do.
We're still working on the revenue numbers.
Yeah. Questions, concerns? It's very straightforward.
How's the other town revenue calculated, or how does it change year to year?
It's calculated, it's a little complicated, it's per capita and it's based on distance. So we're thinking that the further away a town is, like Orland, we would ask for less than, say, Trenton.
So if they grow in population, then they automatically pay a little bit?
Yes, then it's based on population.
But aren't we, I mean, you go ask them and they vote on whether they'll give it to us or not.
Oh,
right?
yeah, it's a
So
whole
not
process.
like it's some guarantee.
No, it is no guarantee. And I have to do their paperwork. It's a considerable amount of time and effort to attend the town meetings, send out the paperwork, collect the signatures. Yeah, and it's no guarantee that we'll get any of it.
Do they pay per person rate? Is that how it works, or is it a flat fee?
It's
per
a,
town?
it's a flat fee, and then the towns that do not agree to fund, we charge every user $30.
Okay.
Yeah.
The payroll is slightly less, you said, because there was some business with people leaving, retiring, coming back.
Yeah, just differences in pay scale and,
Does this also include increase in wages, cost of living, or?
No.
That hasn't been calculated yet?
no, and that's, we've been told don't include the COLA in this.
You mean COLA for FY '25 or for '24?
For 25.
Yeah, no, the COLA is not included for that.
I thought some of the ones that we
Was
did
gonna
under the
say so,
admin
yeah.
did have the COLA in there.
No, they had the
For
COLA from
last
FY
year.
'24, not the planned COLA for FY '25.
Okay.
Are there negotiations this year? Do you have a set, don't you have like a administrative unit for some of the librarians, like a union?
There's an employee association, but since I've been here, it has not been active.
Okay.
Yeah. And since I think that because there was a COLA last year, maybe there, yeah, it wasn't an issue.
Question, it may not be for you, it may be for Ian. This is the first time I've seen a city appropriation that seems to be a net zero, but is almost $500,000. What is city appropriation?
That's what the city pays for.
That's the part of
I
the,
need a little more.
The
to
part
go
of the
in.
budget that the city pays for, so we pay
Okay, so
for
of the full
benefits.
budget, the
Yeah.
city picks up that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the tax commitment
Okay.
for that department.
It's just funny, I haven't noticed it or seen it on the other.
No, you wouldn't.
And every other department's fully funded through the tax
Okay.
commitment.
I'm just trying to decipher, so the estimated revenue change of 1.8%, estimated more or less, doesn't include the benefits, because it looks like they've been moved out of this budget
Yeah.
this year.
so, I don't know the history behind it, but all I know is that last year, I was told to include staff benefits in the library budget, but then during the budget process, no other city departments had their benefits included in
Yeah.
their budget. So that's
So I
why it's
took it out.
out this year. And that's why I have this very complicated little lovely with and without benefits, so that you can kind of see what it looks like. And you can kind of compare apples to apples.
Oh, that's helpful.
That's the
Thank
only
you.
reason I took it out, is because no other department had, like, they had FICA
It's-
and other things, and it didn't seem like we were comparing fairly.
It's not really fair. but it
Between the
makes us-
other departments, so we'll have all that, and ultimately I want to put everything under the department that it goes to, but that's a process. It's a major change.
Okay, gotcha.
So just a little bit explanation on that. The library was kind of treated as its own separate kind of fund. It was still a department, but we'd always include the benefits in theirs, because there was a time where they could carry forward some of their, like, fund balance. So that was why it was always.
But then when that changed.
Mhm.
yeah.
I'd just like to throw out a little history. When Casey and I were elected together, and I don't want to speak for Casey, but I was a little upset that the library funding had been throttled. And last year, I spoke about that again, that, you know, why is it the library is forced to run at a 2015 budget when everyone else doesn't? And the council said, well, go back and, you know, see what you really need to run this place. And the reason I bring that up is I know Nancy is a numbers gal, and last year it shows a 45% increase. And in reality, that was product of them being held to 2015 numbers. And Sarah went back and came up with a more realistic budget. And that's why it shows this big 45% increase last year. The only reason that exists is because they were throttled for so many years. So I don't want anyone to look at that and say, well, they had a 45% increase last year. Well, that's because they had been throttled for several years.
I remember the lawn signs.
We are out of those. For anyone listening, I'm sorry, I apologize. We no longer have any lawn signs.
Should
They
have
serve their
budgeted for
purpose.
it.
Is that an office supply?
I'm not going to reorder.
Well, I just wanted to throw that out. I didn't want someone looking at that saying, wow, 25% last year?
Yeah.
That was a huge increase. Well,
Yeah, thank you for
or
clarifying that.
45, whichever number you want to look at. But that was a product of an adjustment from 2015.
Any more questions?
Would it be helpful for the council to, you also gave us your capital
I was gonna
improvement
say.
plan sheet, there's another session for that? but
Yes.
If you wanna like, a couple sentences, broad strokes, just to give us
In a nutshell, I have a full list of about 27 projects. I'm trying to knock some out with grant money. 2 of these that I gave you tonight are being funded with grant money. And then there are 2 that are the bigger projects that we'll have to take a look at some point. We have 33-year-old boilers that if you're standing at our circulation desk when they turn on, they shake the whole library. So we're just hoping that they don't die very soon. They made it through this winter, so I think we're good for a little while. But it's something that we need to think about soon. That's probably one of the most pressing. We have the biggest project that's on my mind that I didn't even include is the crumbling retaining wall in our parking area with the lovely fence that's falling over. And we are doing a little work to hopefully get some grant funding. There are a couple opportunities coming up that we're working on, but it's a very big project. I've spoken to Matt about it, and I will need guidance. I did not realize when I took this job I was going to be repairing a retaining wall.
Yeah.
You know,
Is that the one behind the lot?
Mhm.
That's the.
yeah, if you walk down the Riverwalk North Trail, you can see the bricks are crumbling. Yay.
So, I know that we'll get to this for the capital improvements, but one of the obvious questions I had was the amount spent on heat. And I'm not aware of many institutions that replace boilers with boilers. Are you looking at other
I
options
have,
for
and
heating?
Matt and I spoke about that a little bit yesterday, but I would love your input if you know.
Efficiency main heat pumps. start there.
That's what Matt and I talked about yesterday.
There's grant money, there's,
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anybody who's replacing boilers anymore. They're looking for
That's
the next
yeah.
generation of heating options,
Yep.
given the costs and the impact on the
That's
budget.
exactly what I thought was,
Yeah,
yeah, heat pumps would be a good option.
and again, efficiency main is at least a starting point, but go PIF
Okay.
for other grant money for.
I'll check it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the other advantage of heat pumps, of course, is cooling,
Yeah.
which we're gonna need more and more.
Yes, we didn't have AC all summer. It was fun.
They're freezing in the winter and sweating in the summer.
I had to invest in a lot of sleeveless dresses this summer.
Yep, that'll work.
Right? I dress seasonally.
So to clarify, that has been repaired, correct? You have no AC today?
No, it was repaired it was either August or September. Yeah.
Good time.
There were a couple different repairs that happened. I think that was the one it was about 3,000. Yeah.
So coming this season, you think you have AC?
Yes, we should.
Okay.
We
That's good
better.
to
Or I'll be calling.
Other questions?
Yeah, do you have other questions about the other capital projects? The basement drain and the windows are the ones that we'll have done within the next 6 months, I hope.
You have grant money for that?
Yes, those are grant funded.
Which one's the basement drain and the windows?
Yes, the Tisdale house, when it rains, it floods.
I see, and you've got that, great.
Mm-hmm. And the large Palladian windows in the new addition, when it rains, there's water dripping down them. It's seasonal.
I guess we'll see you at the Capitol meeting then.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know if we have it. Yeah, they do. Do we have anybody at school?
What number?
It's not in that binder, but Amy's gonna pass
It's
that.
coming.
It has its.
I know, Steve, you're dying to get your hands on it.
Talk about
I
wait till the
know.
last minute here.
I know. Thanks, Sarah. I say give it to everyone last.
I'd be rude.
That's all right. I can check it.
So first, I want to say, it's just one page. So first, I want to say thank you for canceling last week for the school department. We appreciated that. We had things, obviously, we needed to tend to. So I appreciate that very much. And like at the last meeting, I want to thank, this is leadership behind us. Our leadership team is here again. April Clifford will be coming in late. There's a grade 1 concert at the school, so she needed to do the welcome at that. So wanted to walk you through a few things tonight. The PowerPoint will be up on the TV, and I can email you a PDF of it if you would like. First and foremost, for those of you that are new, to just talk about the school department process of the budget, because it is a little bit different, even though we're a department of the city. We've worked really hard the last 2 years, last year being the first, to try to be more collaborative and transparent so that when the school board approves the budget, we're kind of dovetailing with the council and in a partnership together so that the vote goes smoothly and that it's fair and equitable for everyone. And I want to make sure that people know that we are working really hard all the time to identify any grants that we can to bring funding into the school department. I feel like we've done a really good job the last couple of years, in addition to COVID funding, applying for and receiving grant funding to help offset the cost to taxpayers when we can and when it makes sense to. This year, we had some pretty specific goals to achieve in our budget that you can see above. Last year was the first time I actually had my hands on the budget. And one of the things we quickly identified was the lack of equity across the budget, meaning some grade levels, let's use that as an example. If I'm grade 2 and I have one teacher, she may ask for a lot more supplies than classroom number 2 and classroom number 3, and so that's not really equitable across. So we look to streamline things and find savings that way and make sure that it's equitable across the district in terms of classroom supplies for teachers that are your day-to-day consumable versus curriculum and instructional supplies, which to me are very different. We really want to be planful for the future. So every budget that we put together, yes, addresses the needs of now, but is also us thinking ahead to what's coming, what can we capitalize on right now. The biggest thing that you heard me talk about last year is working towards an early childhood collaborative in Ellsworth. As you know, Ellsworth has a crisis with early learning from birth to age 5. And the school department was called on. It was one of the big things people talked to me about when I was first hired, was how can the school department help with the early learning crisis, both from an educational standpoint, but also from a workforce development standpoint. So this past year, we've had an early childhood collaborative that has met monthly, and we've been partnering with local daycare owners, the Y, DCP, really trying to identify what can preschool and early learning like in Ellsworth, and how can the school department be a part of that. And if you've been watching, public school for 4-year-olds is fresh on people's minds, and we currently do not have a pre-K public school offering in Ellsworth. And so a goal in this budget was to make that a reality, because we feel like long-term, that leads to better educational opportunities for our students, starting them earlier, having them in our system, having them learn the routines of being in school is paramount to long-term identifying and catching students early that have gaps. Also in this budget, a goal was valuing our people. In a lot of pay areas, we are not competitive with other schools in Hancock County. We have discrepancy in pay and hourly employees. And this year, we're negotiating 4 different contracts for support staff personnel that we're currently in process. And so really looking at how can we recruit and retain good people? Because if you've been watching the news, people are not going into education anymore in college the way they used to. People are running away from being in the education system now. And so recruitment is going to be even more and more crucial moving forward for all school departments, not just in Ellsworth, but state and nationally. So we have that in the back of our mind as we built our budget. Working on educating the whole student. So we talked last year about how complicated education has become, both from demands of curriculum, but also social, emotional, and behavioral issues that schools are dealing with. We are dealing more than I've seen in all my years in education. So trying to look at fiscally responsible ways to provide resources and supports for teachers and students that are in the school system in this budget. And then finally, really start looking at data to help us make data-driven decisions as we build our budget, so that that's a part of our process each year. Some of the challenges and threats to our budget, first and foremost, unfunded mandates. And if you are someone who speaks to legislators often, I would really ask for your assistance with this. Augusta continues to put forth legislation that has direct impact on school systems and taxpayers that we need to be loud about and we need to have our voice heard about. The paid FMLA leave is an unfunded mandate, and we were told to put 1% of all payroll into our budgets for this year for that new law that's coming in. Also, the biggest one that you've probably heard about is LD 974, which requires school systems to raise, for ed techs, 150% of the minimum wage has to be their base hourly scale. And for all other support staff in a school system, 125% of the minimum wage. What that does, okay, it's really a hard thing to think about because one, of course you value your people and you want them to make a competitive, livable wage. However, passing a law like this without subsidy behind it and it being an unfunded mandate also takes away our right to negotiate contracts. Because if you ever year to year come in with your negotiated agreement under this, the law says that you would have to open and renegotiate and change the scales. So it's complicated, there's a lot to it, it has a lot of support and a lot of opposition, but it definitely puts a burden on taxpayers in local communities when we say Maine is about choice. So unfunded mandates that legislators continue to pass for education is really complicating school budgets everywhere. Also, it looks like moving through legislation is school departments taking over the case management of all 3- and 4-year-olds in special education. So over the next 3 years, school systems are going to be taking over case management of students that are identified as needing support services at ages 3 and 4. Whether you have public preschool or not, you have to case manage those students. What the impact of that is on schools is you already are taking special education departments that are not fully staffed and adding the burden of case management for 3- and 4-year-olds. It's the right thing to do, 100%. We're one of the only states in the United States that doesn't already do this. But we need a plan for how that's gonna look, how that's gonna be funded, how are 3-year-olds that are in a home daycare, how are we going to work with them and meet with them? It's gonna take a lot of planning. The one good thing about this is that there's a 3 to 4 year roll-in before it comes in. And we can choose when we decide to step in or if we want to ease into it. But that is on the horizon and I think is important for the council to know. Talked a lot last year about facilities. For a long time, facilities work on our schools has been kicked down the road. And as we talked about last year, we need to start addressing some of those needs, which we absolutely did last year and we continue to address in this budget. Also, our lease payments at the bus garage. Even if we are to acquire Avery Lane, we still have the lease payment at the bus garage that's really high, so trying to problem solve an idea for that is on our minds. Increasingly complex student and family needs. When I come back to you in April, I'm gonna have some sobering trends to show you about the increase in homelessness for children in our community and the mental health struggles of our student population, and that 100% is a direct impact on our schools and how we service students. And then I've already mentioned the decreased workforce. We've had vacancies all year that have not been filled in our special education department, and that is a trend that is going to continue, not just in special ed, but in regular ed also. Colleges are not graduating teachers at the same rate they did years ago, so we're gonna have a challenge, and that's why recruitment and retention is gonna become so important moving forward. So October 1 is the magic date that the state uses our student enrollment data to capture what we get for subsidy. So these numbers are used to determine what we get for subsidy. So EEMS has 734 this year, which is a little bit down from last year. Ellsworth High School is like under 10 down at 526. Hancock County Technical Center was at 251 this year, and the total enrollment is the top two numbers. It doesn't, HCTC has its own number because it's its own subsidy model, so that gets pulled out of that. So the sheet that you have in front of you is the same format as last year. People seem to like this, so I'll walk you through this for those of you that are new. So on the top part is our cost centers along the left, and you'll see 2023, 2024 budgeted amounts versus 24, 25, the difference and what that percentage is, and that goes across. And I'll talk about what are in some of these cost centers in slides in a minute. I'm just gonna go over the structure of this sheet first. On the bottom, you will see the revenue side of the school department budget. So the mill rate expectation is the local contribution to the school budget. The additional local is what we have to raise. General fund balance. This was a hot topic last year, if you remember. We feel not wonderful, but we feel okay about applying an additional $250,000 to the budget for next year to help offset expenses. So we would recommend putting $1 million of fund balance forward for this budget. CTE is career and technical education, so that's our HCTC fund balance. That is a separate pot of money. So we would recommend putting $105,000 forward for that. Tuition is your revenue that you receive for students that choose Ellsworth High School. So one thing that we'll talk about later in the slides is our EHS tuition rate. And so we have students more and more choosing to come to Ellsworth High School, and that leads to increased revenue for our high school. CTE assessment is a per pupil cost that sending towns pay that goes above and beyond the cost of a program versus subsidy. So for example, if we think that the cost in one program is higher than what we receive for subsidy, the sending town helps offset that, and we bill them for coming to HCTC to help the CTE budget, bottom line. Food service allocation, you will see that that number matches the top. Non-state debt funded service, and then state debt service reimbursement and state subsidy allocation. So non-state funded debt service, correct me if I'm wrong, that's EEMS. And then state subsidy allocation is what we receive for subsidy. Our number went up. If you notice, our state subsidy went, it's because our numbers in economically disadvantaged went way up this year. That, and we've added pre-K to our budget. So when you start a pre-K program, you get front funded. So we said last year that we were going to make a commitment to try to have 2 classrooms of pre-K for a commitment of 32 4-year-olds. So we received state subsidy to fund that ahead of us starting it. It doesn't fully fund the program by any means, but it is a start. And because our economically disadvantaged numbers went up so much, we got additional subsidy. That's worked into that state formula. Our CTE allocation also went up for an increase in revenue there. And then you'll see miscellaneous revenue, it's pretty flat. And so on the bottom, what you'll see is grand total local appropriation. Right now, it would be a 6.99% increase to taxpayers. So even though above budget to budget, our budget is 11% up, the bottom line for taxpayers right now currently would be 6.99% if nothing were to change. What I'm gonna talk about is stuff's gonna change over the next couple of weeks, but I'll explain that. So to kind of dig into this even a little more, if you look at this slide, this shows the FY25 budget allocation. I think it's important for people to understand that we have fixed costs, and that's the majority of our budget. So education, everyone has a negotiated agreement except for administrators, and a few central office employees don't have a bargaining unit that they work with. So salaries and benefits are pretty much set through the negotiation processes. And then you'll see our fixed costs, electricity, tuition for SPED, insurance, our building leases, legal and audit, telephone, internet, all that stuff is fixed costs, and that's 90% of our budget. So what are some changes in our budget so that you know what some of the increases are? Right now, as I said, we're working on 4 negotiated agreements. We have tentative agreements with 2 of our 4 units, and those salary and benefit changes are in here. The other 2 are not yet. Okay, so that's going to be in addition to our budget once those are done. Also in this budget, we continue to need massive behavioral support help. So this budget has 1 person dedicated, it's a BCBA, it's a behavioral analyst that would help in our school. Right now, we have that position, but it's funded through ESSER, so the local budget would pick that up this coming year. Rise of fixed costs is built in. This budget does have 2 pre-K classrooms built in for 4-year-olds, public pre-K, which requires 1 full-time pre-K teacher and 1 ed tech. So each classroom, if you have 16 students, has to do that, but I'm gonna explain to you how we're staffing that in the next slide. And then the state is Xing out our financial software system. We have a transition we have to make. And so, yeah, Tammy knows. So we have our system administration cost center has gone up because we need to make that investment and start transitioning our financial software over. The other programmatic change, not on this slide, that should be, is Hancock County Technical Center is starting a carpentry program in the fall. It is at Sumner Memorial High School as a satellite program, but it is our program. It's just housed in a different location, much like welding is at Bucksport High School currently. So we're excited about that. We had quite an applicant pool for that, so we're thrilled. Yes.
Just a question about the negotiated agreements, that 2 are done and 2 are still in progress.
Yes.
Do these numbers include estimates for the other 2? Or
Not
they're
yet.
completely just not in there at
No,
all?
we were advised not to put anything in because it would taint the negotiations process. We have an idea of where we're headed, and when we come back to you April 10th, that will be, we're very, very close. We're probably gonna know within the next week and a half where we are with that. And we understand that when that happens, we're gonna probably have to do some adjusting.
Because that number, whatever it is, will go under regular instruction?
Some will go under regular and some will go under special education because it's administrative assistants at our schools, and it's our educational technicians, which are both regular and special education.
Okay.
So their current salaries are all in. It's just the raises that are not.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was asking.
Yes.
So their current salaries are actually, it's
Yes.
not like entire
No.
new salaries are going in
No,
there.
and that's 85, approximately 85 employees.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a big one. So things we wish we could have put in the budget, but chose not to be fiscally responsible. We still would love to have a gifted and talented teacher at Ellsworth High School. We still do not. We would have loved to have an additional instructional coach. We currently have one for all 3 schools. It's not enough for what we would like to do to work on Tier 1 instruction. We would love to have a CTE exploratory program, which is a career and technical exploratory program for freshmen in high school, so that they could start understanding what some of the programs are at HCTC. There are additional facilities things that we would have liked to have had in the budget, but we've chosen to wait. And then some co-curricular expansion. Some of the expansion is in this budget, some we've decided to wait on. Things that we have taken out of the FY25 budget to help us keep this manageable. We did have a technology position. We took a technology position out a year ago. We shouldn't have. We really need that position back. We've made do as best we can this year. So we made the decision to not put it back in, but long-term, we would like to see that back in our budget. To create the 2 pre-K teaching positions, we looked at class sizes, and we are transferring 2 current teachers who have pre-K certifications into the 2 pre-K classrooms, which reduces us by 1 kindergarten teacher and 1 grade 1 teacher. That still keeps those grade levels at good class sizes. So I don't want people to think that we're like doubling class sizes in these areas. We believe this is fiscally responsible and is not gonna harm education to the kids of these age level. Having said that, if we get slammed over the next 2 weeks with kindergartners, then we may have to rethink that plan. But right now, our plan is to open 2 pre-K classrooms with 2 current teachers that are pre-K certified, and we would be adding the 2 ed techs. That would be the addition. So the teacher salaries are offset to create the pre-K classrooms. And then currently, we have 1 custodial supervisor, 1 maintenance supervisor. We are merging those into 1 position. So it's a loss of 1 from 2 to 1 in this area. As we've talked about, as we plan for the future, obviously, we've got to finish up our negotiated agreements. Avery Lane is not built into this yet. We have ideas of how that would work and what it would look like, but that's a work in progress, and we still have to pay these leases until we know for sure we can purchase that building. And then, as I've talked about a lot, recruitment and retention of teachers and support staff, we have to be really mindful of that moving forward. So this is what always gets my stomach churning. So FY23, and anyone can go to this website and look at this. Every year, the state gets everyone's expenditures from the fiscal year prior, and then they do a per pupil calculation. For FY23, the per pupil calculation statewide average was $23,920. We are at $15,916. And we are the lowest in Hancock County. And I say that because as the leader of your school system, that's hard for me to see, because I know that people think we're so high and our raise last year was so big, but it really isn't when you look at the costs of everything nowadays and you look at people trying to pay their people a better wage. So this has been sobering for us as a leadership team to look at and know that there's more we want to do and things we want to do, and making decisions to keep things out of budgets for this year, or knowing that we may have to cut more. If people aren't comfortable with the 6.99, knowing we have to cut more. That's a hard thing for us as the leaders of your school system. The other piece to this that I want to mention is on the budget sheet that I showed you for revenue, okay? This data is what helps the state determine your tuition costs. So if we're spending less per pupil, when we get our state tuition average for what we can bill towns for kids coming, we could be getting more revenue. We have kids choosing to come to us more and more. And because our per pupil expenditures is so low, we're not maximizing that revenue. So we've got to figure out a balance, because obviously if you live in a rural area, your costs are higher. But even if I go outside Hancock County, we're not close to Brewer or Bangor, and schools of likewise size, we're very low per pupil, which is great if you want to be efficient and not spend a lot of money. But if you're looking at quality of what your school department can do and how we're doing business, we can't continue to operate at that. Then I did some slides, which will put you to sleep, about EPS, in case you were curious. So for those of you that don't know, state subsidy is determined by the state every year. Everyone sits on the edge of their seat in January waiting for the report to come out to find out, did your valuation go up? Did your subsidy increase, or did it decrease? And for us, luckily, it increased this year. So EPS was designed to provide equity for education, for funding across the state. A lot of people would argue it does not do that. The model's designed to look year to year at educational trends. They do try at the Department of Ed to look at prior year's expenditures, how are things jumping, cost of living, things like that, to make their adjustments. What EPS doesn't do is tell us how we should spend our funds, where we should spend them. We simply get the allocation. That allocation determines how much we have to raise, and then we decide how we're going to spend those funds. So this year in Maine, I think it's important to note the FY25 EPS calculation. Locals are being asked to pick up 45%, and the state did fund at 55%, which was the commitment. So that is the state appropriation and versus the local appropriation statewide for funding education in Maine. And then these are the things that they look at when they are determining your subsidy and what you get. So they do look at an average of enrollment, so that schools that dip up and down a little bit, it's an average, it's not just that 1 year. They do calculate a per pupil amount as part of your subsidy. So obviously the more students you have, the more money you're going to get. And then they give you a weighted amount based on your numbers. So if you have an increase in multilingual learners, which we did, if you have an increase in economically disadvantaged, which we definitely did, then you get an additional amount per pupil based on those things above and beyond the regular per pupil count that helps determine your subsidy. Then they have targeted funds that they give school systems, pre-K being one of them. Because I said we would have 32 students in 2 pre-K classrooms, we did get funding for that. If we decide through the budget process we're only going to have 1 classroom, they take away subsidy for the 16 students that you're no longer committing to. So that just adjusts your numbers. You do get targeted funding for technology and assessments, a per pupil rate. And then they look at other adjustments in other areas as well. So things that they look at is mill rates. Towns are, of course, valuation went up last year, so that definitely hurt us. I'm going to just go back. So for tonight, that's kind of where we're at with our budget, and I definitely would love input, questions. The plan for us is I come to finance Friday morning, And so if people sit on this, think about things, and have further questions, you could send them to Tammy, and then we can talk about them on Friday morning. And then I come back to the council April 10th for a second run at this. And by then, I think numbers will be pretty firm and fast. Then we are having our school board meeting on the 11th, which is a change from the 9th because you're having a meeting that night. So we moved our budget meeting for the school board to April 11th, so a day after the council meeting, so that we can vote. And then Monday, the 15th, is your official vote on the school budget. What's going to be really important that everyone understands is that April 15th, if we don't pass a budget, we are not going to meet the timeline for the referendum. So I will not have a budget for July 1. So between now and that vote, questions, concerns, changes that need to be made, collaboration needs to happen over these next couple of weeks. Because if we have to have an additional referendum, that's going to be at a cost to taxpayers, and I know none of us want to do that. So being transparent and answering your questions that you have between now and then, I'm happy to do whenever, so that we can make sure that that is smooth. All right, let me have it. Here we go.
Great presentation,
Thank you.
as always.
Yes.
I have I'll just give you my question and you can decide what kind of question it is. I'm interested in learning more about the students who come from out of town.
Mhm.
If it's, the only phrasing I can think of is a moneymaker. Are they fully covered? Is this a good thing for the budget as much as it is for the student population?
Yep, so that gets asked every year. It gets asked every year. And I would say state subsidy doesn't even cover our Ellsworth costs. The way subsidy works is it doesn't fully fund any education. However, I get your question because they're not paying taxes here. So for us, having more students provides a more rich opportunity for our taxpayers and further strengthens our academics and our programs. If we became a smaller school, like half the size, we would not be able to offer the AP, dual enrollment, some of the performing arts stuff that we offer. So to me, does tuition cover every single? No, it does not. But we'd still be paying electricity. We'd still be paying heat of that building. So to me, yes, it is worth it.
So how many students is that? How many
It's-
students currently?
So if I recall correctly, it's a little over half,
Just for the high school?
just for the high school. Is that right? I'm pretty sure I'm right. I can get you.
It's usually about 60-40.
Okay.
60 Ellsworth, 40 outlining.
And the out-of-town is only for the high school?
Yes.
Um,
Because we have so many towns that don't have high schools. And so
Yeah,
they have
mm,
choice.
Right, no, I understand
Yeah.
that. So let me ask you the other.
I gotta get off
That
this
helps me
so I
better
can-
understand it, and now I guess I'll go with outlandish question.
No, you're fine.
I know that there are towns that recruit students even from out of country.
Oh, yeah.
And what have the conversations been here about that? I know it's a complex issue, but just curious.
So we
how it
have
falls
never,
here.
as far as I know, and I've been here since 2004,
Mm.
we've never recruited outside of the country. Now, we've had exchange students, most
Right,
certainly come
right.
through exchange programs, but we have never participated in recruiting out of country that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I know of. I'm gonna find the data about towns.
Yeah, just.
More common for town academies to do that.
Yes.
That makes sense. And that's the one
Yes.
that I'm thinking of where I know that they bring it is actually an academy. so-
Yeah. Town
Just curious.
academies around the state do that.
Oh, here it
Public
is.
schools don't.
Okay,
Let's see if I,
also usually provide housing.
right.
I'm gonna see
I know,
if I
like I said,
can-
I know there are complexities to it, I'm not recommending it, I'm
just
just
come
asking.
do it, please.
If it's been a piece of it. I'm surprised.
I have the
with
data
that
right here.
Number for the high school.
I have the data, I'll show it to you. I knew I had it. Oh. Yes. All right.
There were.
I have to take my glasses off to see the screen. So I can actually show you a breakdown. I need a passcode. I'm here. All right. So this shows you Ellsworth resident students for the last several years at EEMS versus EHS. So I think we said our enrollment was at 526 for 2023, 2024, and 324 are Ellsworth residents. So Dan was right, it's like that 60-40. So one of the biggest things, and we talk about this a lot, that's part of that kick in the stomach of the per pupil expenditures. We could charge more tuition if we weren't spending so little per pupil overall to bring in additional revenue to help offset that.
Is there
Yes.
a way to do a projection of that?
Yeah.
Like, what if we sort of said, okay, fine, we're gonna spend $20,000 per kid? What would that look like, and then what would we, is there a way
The
to-
state does the tuition amount, correct? And so we don't calculate that. The state does that, and they do it annually. And it's based on what everybody is spending. I mean, could we look at a flat number and give you an idea of what a difference would be? Yes. If we looked at, okay, if we spent, are you saying, Casey, if instead of spending the 15.9, if we spent 18,000, how much revenue would that increase?
Yeah, just
Okay.
to sort of like, because you're making a good point that maybe we are not actually getting the tuition money we should be getting because we're skimping on our students. And so if we didn't, how much money would come in for that, or what would that?
So for our April meeting, we can show you guys that. At least look at it in a couple different ways maybe to show how that would map
And I think,
out.
because what I've been hearing, and along the lines of what Casey's saying, is that if we were to spend, whether it's 18 or 20,000, pick a number in there,
Mhm.
it wouldn't cost Ellsworth all of that. It would, what would the net impact on Ellsworth school budget be between the the state contribution and tuition? You could say that we could increase it by, $2,500 per student, and the impact on Ellsworth taxpayers would only be
We can try.
1,500 or 1,000 per student. Just trying to put numbers to the pitch that you were making,
looking
that
at my
it could
finance
help us.
Okay.
Okay, so
They're
is
making-
that-
see the expense.
They're making a note.
Exactly, it isn't just the revenue, it's the net. Is that, Casey, what you were thinking?
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? If it,
Right.
yeah.
What does it look like?
What
if
you're
we were
saying.
to-
Or does the state decide based on the average of all of the school systems per county or per state, and then would it
There's
just
a
be a drop in the
maximum
bucket?
tuition rate that we can look up, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, let us
It's
do
capped.
some research.
We're not at that cap.
Yeah, we're not.
Okay.
So let us look at that and do some comparisons, and we can bring that back for sure. And if we have it before April 10th, we can bring it to finance and disseminate it as well, so that you guys can look at it ahead of time.
I think putting some
too.
numbers to the point that you were making would be helpful.
Yep, we can absolutely do that. Yes.
So, I'm remembering over the last couple of years, that we had a whole conversation last year about there being an increase, but a lot of that was also related to the fact that we had been eating away at our, fund balance.
Yes.
Inappropriately eating away at our fund balance over a course of years.
Yep.
And so, even to call last year's an increase was not actually, I mean, we felt it, taxpayers felt it as an increase, but it wasn't an increase so much as it was making up for some taking money from places we shouldn't have taken it over a long time. So I just want to make that point. I'm going to say what I say every year, which is like, this is not enough. I don't think this is enough. It makes me sick to my stomach to think that we pay so much less that we invest so much less per pupil than these surrounding areas. Like, to me, this actually is the most important thing. All the things are really important, and this is the most important thing. So I will always want to be putting more for the students, for the children. I know that doesn't really change that much for me to say that, because I know you guys are working hard to make it even and to expand things in a responsible way, and I appreciate how hard that is. I'm really happy to see pre-K. I'm really, really happy to see pre-K. That's it. And also, I'll just a shout out to our school system, because my second kid is about to finish high school, and my first kid is out of high school, and given the fact that I would have liked you to spend more money on them, they had an incredible education in Ellsworth, and we've been really happy, so.
Thank you.
Very thankful for the dedication of the teachers.
Thank you.
Couple questions, Amy.
Yeah.
For the declining enrollment at EEMS, is
Yep.
that population trends primarily, or?
So it's really interesting when I look at it. We have a lot of families that are homeschooling. I would say that rate has gone up a little bit. People that are looking for the way school used to be, with not the increased behaviors, social, emotional. I think we have some families choosing to do that and utilizing that option. It's really interesting because the high school and HCTC numbers are going up, and EEMS kind of just does this here and there. We thought this incoming kindergarten class was going to be really big based on prior years, and this year's incoming class was really small.
Coming up for this fall?
This past year, this current year right now. And we're not sure where kindergarten registration will be, but that definitely hit it. We also, not having pre-K, a lot of school systems have pre-K in their elementary school, and it does increase your student population. We have not had that, but yeah, it is interesting to look at. Our high school numbers are going up, and EEMS just kind of does this little fluctuation here and there. I think what's interesting is people always say, well, Amy, all I hear is how full the school is. And it does feel that way because of the behaviors and the complexities of education right now. And so schools are really trying to do what they can with the space they have to minimize and spread things out, is really what it comes down to. So even though our student population has declined at EEMS, it is not that it's more complicated is what it is, much more complicated. Now, this is Ellsworth residents, so EEMS's number 698 was over 700 on the original enrollment slide, because we do have students from other towns that come to EEMS, like teachers who bring their children to school. That's a part of their negotiated agreement. We have Ellsworth residents who teach in another town, their children go to those. I mean, that's just part of the life of a teacher. You bring your children with you. And we do have some students on superintendent's agreement, but we get to count those students and get subsidy for those kids. So that's why that number is not that over 700 number that you saw at the beginning.
Well, we just enrolled our son for kindergarten for next year.
You
so-
did.
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
It is very exciting and horrifying, just, I'm not ready. But, no, that's helpful. Can you go to the slide about the things you wanted but you're not putting in?
Oh, what happened to my screen?
Sorry, I overlook it.
Technology and I, man.
Massive.
It says I'm in the meeting.
You're probably in the meeting.
I did it all by myself.
Yeah.
For, what's CTE mean?
Career and Technical Education. So it was a program from Hancock County Technical Center that we actually received subsidy for and approval for. But we pulled out because we thought the subsidy didn't cover the cost of the whole program to start. And so we made a decision to go with carpentry to start instead of having two programs.
Okay. And facilities work is just like upgrades to facilities.
Yeah, we have a plan that we're actually going to present to school board in April of some work with Efficiency Maine and working on putting together some things to try to accomplish more facilities work that won't necessarily be a burden to the taxpayers long term. We're trying to find ways to accomplish those things without decimating budgets. I mean, it's the same problem with the library and everywhere else. I mean, if we don't take care of our buildings, we're going to be in a pickle, and we are. I mean, our high school and HCTC is what it is, but our high school also is at that point where it needs significant work.
What is co-curricular expansion?
So one of the things that we did as part of our Value Our People work was we really did a cost analysis of pay. We looked at from administrators all the way down to stipended coaches and co-curricular, where we were at in comparison to the county and the state. And in spite of our wonderful athletic accomplishments at Ellsworth High School, we were the lowest paying in Hancock County, and we are one of the only Class B programs that doesn't have paid assistant coaches for their varsity. They're all volunteers. So we had wanted to add paid assistant positions to all of our varsity sports, and couldn't do it. We just decided it wasn't fiscally responsible in this year to do it. So we decided to do a phase-in model. So we did do a scale raise for our current positions to try to make them more competitive, and we're still not there, but it is a bump. And we decided to look at, of all of the positions that we were looking to add paid assistants to, we looked at the ones we thought needed for safety immediately, which was baseball and softball. You have to have a first base coach. And right now those are volunteers. So we added those, but we eliminated paid assistants for boys and girls soccer and boys and girls basketball. And so we'll continue to be in Class B schools that don't have that. So that doesn't expand a program, but it adds value to a program. We also, some things we did put in. Skills USA at the middle school is in the budget for next year, and that's a program expansion for kids. There were a couple of other things, I'm not going to remember specifically, but there were a couple of other things that we decided to wait on as well.
So I would imagine a lot of these look to be more at the high school level. I would imagine if more programs or the investment in these types of things, the high school level would help attract students from other towns as well.
Yes. Our VPA, our athletic program, 100% helps recruit from other towns, 100%. Both of those programs we have really strong reputations in. Our robotics club is growing. Some of the STEM stuff that we're doing, K-12, Skills USA, and the momentum they have and expanding that into the middle school, all of those things are just going to help build our educational program for kids long term, for sure. And I would say, one of the things that we are worried about is I have been very transparent with my staff that I don't know where this bottom line, what's going to be the push and the pull. And when we add the additional raises in, there is nothing in this budget left to cut but personnel. And so when I get to a point of, okay, we've reached a negotiated agreement for all these groups and we put those raises in, that's going to raise that 6.99%. And so I'm then going to be forced to figure out, okay, what's what's the good line for us to come to that both sides feel really good about. We've already cut supplies, professional development down to what we can cut it to. So if we were to, do you have the spreadsheet up by any chance? I think if we came in at 3% for taxpayers, we were looking at cutting over $500,000 to the budget to kind of give you an idea of where we'd have to be at.
What does that mean?
So on the bottom where it says grand total local appropriation, 6.99%, if we were to get that down to say 3%, okay, which is a number people have thrown out at me, okay, we would have to cut approximately $500,000. That's before I add my raises for my negotiated agreement. So that's gonna be even higher.
That would, you're saying all come from salaries, or for the most part? And that would be how many positions?
Looking at it, I think we're talking, depending on what positions I'm looking at, okay, it would be anywhere from 5 to 10. Because it would be probably a mix of your educational technicians, your support staff, and your teachers. And that's one of the things that's really uncomfortable to say, right? So if I try to get us to 3%, if that's where the council decides we need to land, those are the conversations we have to have at the school level, is what are we gonna do to get us there? And so at 6.99, we feel like that's fiscally responsible with COLA, with negotiated agreements, with our fixed costs. If we add negotiated agreements on top of that, we feel like we'll figure it out and get us back to 6.99. We feel like that's where that's our sweet spot, we feel like. We feel like we're not decimating programs, we're not really like scratching our head trying to figure out what positions would be the best ones. We feel like 6.99 is kind of our sweet spot right now. And we are prepared, when the negotiated agreements are done, to figure that out and get us back there. Because obviously that will go up when we put those raises in. So we know that we'll have to bring that back down. But if we have to go below that even more, that's when we're gonna start really feeling the burn and really have to talk about what we really feel like this budget should look like. And that's what I'm kind of asking for, is for really good feedback from you over the next couple of weeks of what that bottom line, where you think we should be, so that we can make planful decisions moving forward.
When do you expect to be done with your negotiations?
We're hoping early next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had another great meeting today. We're very close. Yeah.
So I have a question tying this back to the original budget. You mentioned with special ed, I think in particular, you said that's where you had unfilled positions. They were budgeted but unfilled all year. So they're not here that needing more, you just need the ones that you budgeted last year. So if it's in the budget for this year to have people that you've never hired, what happens with that money that was never spent because you don't have the staff?
So we had to do a lot of creative things. So we gave stipends to some people who had to pick up additional case management or additional paperwork. Some of that money is towards your fund balance.
Okay.
And then those positions are currently still in the budget because by God, we need them.
Right, because you need to fill them, I get that.
Yes.
And so they're not there because you just need what you've budgeted. And
Correct.
then the reallocation of this year's money
Correct.
is helpful.
Yep,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thanks.
LD 974, the ed tech minimum of 150% of minimum, that's state minimum wage, or how does that compare with, I guess, with current salaries and also what you're proposing for a more competitive salary?
So I have to be careful what I say, John, because that's who
still in those
we're
negotiations.
negotiating with.
I guess then with just
I
the current salaries.
can show you though, and not right this second, but I can show you all state superintendents did an analysis of what the impact, if we were to do it now, what would be the increase in the impact, and I have that I can bring up and show you all and send that to you. I just think it's those kinds of things, great intention, and again, totally want to do that for people, would love to do that for people. But when lawmakers in Augusta are making these rules for communities and school systems without a solution for funding, you're you're hamstringing us. It's more complicated sometimes, very well intentioned, but not necessarily the best way to go about doing it.
Hopefully, though, that will help with the, depending, we don't know how much, is that $1 an hour increase? Is it a $5 an hour increase? But, you know, you hear, I could be flipping burgers instead of doing this much more complex work. So hopefully that will, depending on how much that increase is, and it'll be interesting to know, again, just based on what's currently paid.
Yes, I can, like I said, we did that, so I can send you guys all of that so you can look at it.
Yeah, and then hopefully that helps with the hiring because of hiring.
And I do
wages.
think that's part of the intent behind it.
Yeah.
What's hard is when you have negotiated agreements
Yeah,
and you have a
yeah.
process, it just complicates it, for sure. Definitely adds to the
Yeah.
workload.
The,
I can't believe you haven't said anything yet.
wait till the end.
I know, he's waiting to the end.
I'll step
No,
in.
go ahead, go ahead.
So the number we saw, I think it was 2023 numbers where we were, the lowest of the county. Do we have 2024, or you're on a calendar year, not a fiscal year? Or?
So we go July 1 to June 30, and so FY '24 per pupil expenditures won't come out until this time next year. So, because they look at what you spend right up until June 30th, and then you have so many months to get all your stuff uploaded to the state, and then they calculate this and put it out.
Do you have a sense, without it going first to the state, of looking at this proposed increase and okay, there's no way to.
No, because it's hard, right? I mean, we were in a freeze last year, we're in a freeze this year. Like, it's like we can't get ahead. I mean, that's the other
Yeah, you're
complication
saying
of
it's
this.
unlikely that it has changed much at all, because
Yeah.
we actually haven't changed.
Even with our increase last year, I think you're gonna find, I think we'll go up a little bit, but I don't think it's gonna go up monumentally, because we've been in a freeze since January. So unless it's an absolute necessity, we have not been spending.
I would like to see like the past 5 years, they have that information.
Steve?
Are you looking to end the night? Is that what you're?
I mean, if no one has any more questions.
Yes, to support you.
I have a simple question that I ask every year.
Is it simple, Steve?
It really is.
Okay.
Well, first of all, this budget that you presented is pretty polite.
That's a compliment.
I know.
It's a compliment.
Damn, you guys.
It's a pretty polite.
All right.
7%, that's pretty polite given the circumstances and what you've had to balance here. And I ask this question each year, and I'd like you to walk us through the food choices without the stigma of low and income
Yeah.
tickets or whatever they
Yeah.
do.
Hot
What
lunch.
is EEMS, what is available to them at no cost, and also at the high school? And is it in this budget, or is it federally funded or state funded, or what
Yep.
have you?
And Mr. Barry, my food service director's here, so if I screw this up, he
Yeah.
can come correct me.
just
So
hoping it's available to
The state
everybody.
of Maine is currently providing free breakfast and free lunch for all kids. So whether they're at EEMS or EHS, they are able to eat without any stigma at all. They don't have to apply for free and reduced lunch anymore. They don't have to do any of that. So our economically disadvantaged numbers, I think, have actually gone up because of the change in practice. So a lot of families didn't want to fill out the free and reduced lunch form because of the stigma, and then children not wanting to identify as they went through the line. Now, any child can go up, and as long as they take all the components of the reimbursable meal, if they want to buy a la carte and buy a chicken burger, that's a little different, but they can get free breakfast, free lunch. And instead now what happens is there's an economically disadvantaged form that every family fills out. And you either qualify or you don't even really know what it's for. I mean, I fill it out, everybody fills it out through the registration process. And then it gets picked up on the back end by the state that they're economically disadvantaged based on their formula. And families that didn't fill it out at all, we called. And part of the process is we can now have school employees certify that we called and do the form for them over the phone. And some were very comfortable and willing to do it that way once they understood that it had nothing to do with the qualifying them for free and reduced lunch, because there is that stigma. So we're really lucky that that's still part of what we do in Maine, is provide free breakfast and lunch. Yeah, I know you like that. Is that really it?
That's it. I'm not
Holy
gonna-
cripe, okay, we're done.
What are you looking for from us more tonight?
So, really, over the next couple of weeks, knowing is 6.99 a number you can live with? Because if it's not, we need to know that. I mean, if you have a number in your head that we wanted you to come in at 1%, then I need to know that sooner rather than later so that I can really start making some strategic decisions with the leadership team about what we need to do. That's really what I need, because what I don't want to have happen is school board pass a budget they feel good about and then come to you on April 15th and have you be like, nope, not doing this. That would not feel good or look good, I don't think, for either side. And so I just want to make sure that if there's questions or concerns, or you have specific ideas in your head of what you want this to look like, that those get communicated sooner rather than later, so it's a smooth process for everybody.
Steve thinks it's a polite budget.
I know. I'm like, do I need to add? Because I could add, Steve.
We don't yet have a full,
I know.
so we don't know what the entirety of the city's budget is actually looking like, so it's hard to.
Yeah.
And that is always the rub, and that was a problem last year. And I will say, and Matt and I have talked about it, Charlie and I have already talked about it, like, the school budget is the only piece of the city budget that goes to referendum, which complicates this whole thing because we are held to a different standard and a different timeline than everybody else is. And so that's really complicated for us, because if we don't have a budget July 1, that just the morale goes down, like, it's just not good.
And we have to pay for a whole separate election, which costs us money too.
Yes, and so us having to go through that process speeds us up, so we're always ahead. And so that complicates things absolutely for you guys to know where that puts everything. But that is the process, unfortunately.
But if it is helpful, that said, I tend to agree with, both Steve and Casey so far of, like, I'd like to see all the programs you mentioned funded. And they line up, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of the comprehensive plan and directors from that, and also HCTC's carpentry program and the need for building new houses and the housing plan. It just ties in with a lot of what the city is trying to push for.
Well, I will say, I think it's been really good, the collaboration between us. I mean, Casey's on the Early Childhood Collaborative. We met just the other day about that. Tammy's on our strategic planning. Matt keeps me in the loop about the city plan and what's going on. I mean, I do think we're in a good groove of collaboration with the school and the city, and really trying to make sure that we're working collaboratively on different projects and making sure that everything's kind of lined up. I think that that's been really good. So that is something that I am proud of, that I feel like the team, both sides, have accomplished over the last year, for sure.
Yeah, I know I can't speak for everyone, but I know for the next 13 years, I'll be quite invested in a strong school system here. And looking, just knowing the breakdown, and that doesn't make, I don't want to spend more money, but at the same time, I want, those numbers, I'm not very pleased by that either, so I can't speak for everyone, but I think this was quite polite, and you don't always have to be so polite if you're trying to
Well,
get things done, if you want.
Matt, do you hear this?
I think 7%'s hitting it right, but I don't make the final decision.
I know, teasing you.
6.99.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You can give 0.01%.
Just to speak to one thing, I know I already had my turn, but
I'll allow it.
You'll allow
You
it,
were so
okay.
polite the first time. You get to go again.
So, you mentioned going to referendum,
Yeah.
and I have mentioned before, and I didn't gain any traction, that why doesn't the whole thing go to referendum or none of it go to referendum? And I've heard some chatter about the school budget not going to referendum after a certain point.
Yes.
Well, we voted for it last year, right?
Every 3 years?
Every
But yeah, it's in
It
a
is every
3-year.
3 years.
But we
Right.
just voted for it last year, right?
Right,
Yes.
right.
So,
Which-
Matt, you can speak to this too, and I am gonna talk to Charlie about this next week, but what we talked about is because it just went to the voters and they passed it, we should honor that. But when we looked into it legally, we
We
don't
don't
believe we have to.
So then maybe next time around.
Yes.
It was a small.
And that's not to say we don't want taxpayers involved and participating in the budget process and giving us feedback. But it does add a layer of stress, anxiety, workload for the city, workload for us. And if we don't have to do it that way, because it does pit the school budget against everything else. And it feels gross to the people sitting behind me. It feels gross to the teachers. I mean, I know my people are all watching this at home, and that angst is there when you know that you are under a different level of scrutiny because your budget goes for vote comparatively to the city, and you're told you're a department of the city, but you are treated a little bit differently, and it's more identified out in the tax bill. I mean, everything just adds a layer of scrutiny to the school budget. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it is a layer that is present for us that's not for other people. You're right.
Well, and it was a small election too, the one that decided that. It made me,
Yes.
so it made me sort of laugh about it because it was basically, we asked the people who come out to vote when most people don't come out to vote if they want to vote.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they love to vote. That's why they came out when no one else came out.
Self-selecting
But it should be, one or the other. Either the entire budget goes or no budget goes.
Yeah.
It just is unbalanced in my.
Yeah, and we have, that's been talked about over the last couple of months.
How many municipalities our size do it like that? Do we know?
You expect me to know that?
So it
You know
used to
everything.
be, the charter dictated that, the council would approve the municipal and school budget. This is before law changed, and then all of a sudden they said it had to go to voters, because it hasn't always been like that.
No.
So that's where the separation started, because there was law. that
State
said-
law, so every
And then
community
it
had to
reversed
do it?
back, that then you could choose and now you don't have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
And it might have happened all around the time when the RSU formation.
Yes,
Yeah,
I do think that
That's what it was for.
it
to
was
make
for
sure
that.
that there was local voice with
Yes.
these regional school units. And then the plan was to sundown that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we haven't
We're just
sundown.
in the process of sundowning it.
Yeah.
I hope, yes.
On a summer evening when it sunsets at 10 o'clock.
But there's an opportunity if after this next cycle of elections, because the voters voted on it, then taking that, again, the resources and time that the city and school put into their budgets and that election to potentially opening up to still involve the taxpayers in a different way. Doing some our public engagement of some sort where it's not necessarily an election, but still has
Right.
a public component to it.
But ultimately, the council would vote.
Right.
Yeah. And we think we could potentially do that next year.
I think if we can keep doing the elections for 2 more years.
I think it was 2 years.
Then,
This year, next year, and then.
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't it for 3 years?
3 years.
I think it was 3 years, so we have 2
I
more.
think the question is, do you want to continue to vote for the next 3 years on the school budget?
But that's a good idea, like thinking of ways to engage the public other than voting actually could be more actually
Right.
educational and useful.
And you could do the whole budget at once instead of separating out the school
Yeah.
from the rest of the budget.
That would be interesting to think about how to pull off a meeting like that.
Well, we might be having an election workshop soon, so maybe that's a topic of discussion.
That is correct. That is coming up.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank
And
you.
everybody else.
Thank you very much.
So if anyone thinks of anything in the meantime, Amy's going to be coming to Finance Committee on Friday morning to kind of get some feedback. There's a few things that I wanted to kind of chat with her about, some more information that I think that we're going to need, and not just us, but the public, and I think it would be good information to have, especially when we have, the new council here. So,
For Friday.
It'll be this Friday.
this Friday.
Do we have an agreed upon number that this goes under in the book?
So the school one is actually separate from the binder.
In your front flap.
Are there
So
any,
in the front flap.
are all the other numbers accounted for?
Yes. Or they will be.
Yeah, that'd be real.
Yeah.
You've seen them before. Stick around.
You talking about the kid?
Kiddo, Mr. Jack.
What does he do this year?
He's at the Montessori school.
Finding them.
It's 10 o'clock.